Good morning.
Good morning.
Laura, I'll be on my computer in a few minutes, but I'm on my phone for the moment.
Okay, great. Hey, Carl, I'm glad you could join us. Hi, Debbie.
Hi.
Okay, I'll call this meeting to order. Do we have any public comment? All right, hearing none. Let's go on to the minutes of March 2nd.
Can you see my screen, Laura?
Melinda, is that Melinda that's just said that?
Yes.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay.
Yep.
You see the minutes?
Yes.
Okay.
So Melinda, on that second page, right at the second line, that one sentence, I think just needs to be reworded. It says Melinda stated there is an exemption whether a farm or not to protect self or property with firearms.
So basically, yeah, what I intended to say is whether it's a farm or not, you still have the right to protect yourself or property.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah.
Maybe adding a couple of commas there would help.
Yeah, I think, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, that makes sense now.
Mhm.
Hi everyone, I have a loaner laptop this morning because the battery in my actual laptop, my work laptop, exploded.
Oof.
And yeah, it's very dramatic. And this laptop doesn't have a camera, so I'll just be pictureless.
Okay, thanks, Kim.
Laura, I'll move approval of the minutes.
Okay, thank you, Reed. I just saw one other thing before we do that. Let's see, where was it? Second to last paragraph, second to last line. No, you were, sorry. On page 2, sorry. The last line where it says Governor Chittenden Road has never been noticed, and I think it just should be notified.
She and other property owners on Governor and Chittenden Road have never been noticed. Yeah, okay.
Just notified.
Mhm.
Okay. Unless she said noticed, but it just made sense to me that it's notified. Thanks, Reed. Do I hear a second to approve the minutes as amended?
I'll second.
Thanks, Carl. All those in favor of approving the minutes as amended, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Hi.
I guess I'll abstain since I wasn't at the last meeting.
Thank you, Terry.
This is Eric. I will abstain as well, even though since I only logged in for to say goodbye to you all.
Thank you, Eric. All right, I think that means we still have a quorum. Is that correct, Melinda?
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay, great. Thank you. The minutes have been approved. Let me just wait for Melinda to come back. Okay, so we will move on to, Reed had suggested, and it's a great idea to look at strategies, the strategies for conserving high priority parcels and the ones that Williston has in place. So we can take a look at that.
Yeah, so all I really did was I tried to gather up a list of strategies and provided a description, and in the third column just stated whether or not the town has implemented the policies. So I'm happy to entertain any questions you guys have about that, or if you just want to talk about it, go for it.
I guess that since the specific plan seems relevant to the River Hill Farm discussion, which we are receiving letters for.
Not River Hill Farm.
Sorry, not River Hill Farm, Windswept Farm. Still looking at the minutes. I think at least I would benefit from an overview of how that functions, and I don't know if this is the right place for this conversation, but I think like maybe more broadly, I'm not totally clear on what our role with the conversation around Windswept Farm is at this stage. Like, we're getting these letters and I'm sort of, I don't know. I guess
Is this the Glacier property, or is there
Yeah.
something happening with Windswept? Okay.
that they're the same. Like the Windswept Farm uses the Glazer property. All the letters that we got about the Glazer property, like a lot of them referenced Windswept Farm,
Oh.
and they're proposing the specific plan. So I think for this time, I guess, or for this table, I would just love to have maybe some more clarity on how that works.
Melinda,
I can talk about that generally without really specifically referring to the potential Glazer project because we haven't gotten any application yet. So if you would like, I can bring up the chapter on the specific plan and we can go through it. Would that be helpful?
Unless everybody else does not want to spend our time that way, I would find it helpful.
I think it'd be helpful.
no, I think it's a great idea.
Okay.
And while you're bringing it up, can you just clarify that, like, at this point, with regard to the Glazer property, there's nothing has been asked of us. Like, people are sending us these letters, but there's nothing like in front of us to do right now necessarily, except read the letters. Is that correct?
That is correct. Letters have also been sent to the DRB, even though they don't really have a role in this at all. So I think, given that your role as the Conservation Commission protecting open space, and there is this interest to protect open space for this particular parcel, I think that's why you've been getting the letters.
Have you been, Melinda, I guess I've been on vacation. Have you been sharing those letters? Because I haven't. seen
Yeah,
them.
they should be in your inbox.
Oh, how many were there?
I think there were like
Great.
3.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Yeah. So basically the specific plan is a mechanism that allows the zoning to be changed for a particular parcel to accommodate a proposed development that is sort of outside of the allowed uses of that specific zoning district. It's in this case, well, yeah, so that's generally what it is. Or to sort of propose a development that somehow is outside of some aspect of the zoning. So a specific plan is an amendment to the town's comprehensive plan and the bylaws. So it's both. And a specific plan is authorized by Vermont statutes because it consists of amendments to the town plan and the bylaws. So the only way that a specific plan can be approved is if the Planning Commission makes a determination that a substantial benefit to the town could result from the proposed amendments to the bylaws and the proposed amendments to the town plan that comprise the specific plan. And then it lists possible substantial benefits, one of which is open space, conserving one or more open space assets identified in a comprehensive plan, or another open space asset that's, that the Conservation Commission and Planning Commission approve. Also, affordable housing is a substantial benefit. Providing a major infrastructure asset is another benefit. Making a major contribution to public infrastructure required for the development of pedestrian-friendly, design-conscious, mixed-use town center. Providing significant job retention or expansion. However, this benefit must be combined with at least one of the other substantial public benefits listed. And then, it talks about where transit is developable, is available. Any development permitted by specific plan that doesn't make sense. It will employ 100 or more people, must provide discount bus passes to employees, blah, blah, blah. So this is the key part here about the substantial benefit. In making its determination of substantial benefit, the Planning Commission shall consult as appropriate with the Conservation Commission, Historic and Architectural Advisory Committee, DPW, and other town boards and officials. And then just compliance with the requirements of the bylaw is not a substantial benefit to the community. A substantial benefit has to be actions that are above and beyond what an applicant would be required to take to comply with the bylaw. So the process is basically, an application gets submitted for a specific plan. Planning Commission reviews the application at a regularly scheduled meeting. And if the Planning Commission tentatively determines that a substantial benefit may result from adoption of specific plan, it'll schedule a public review of the application. So assuming that the Planning Commission does think that a substantial benefit could result, and they don't have to make a definite determination, but they think, well, yeah, there's a good potential for substantial benefit, then they schedule a community meeting and they appoint a citizens advisory committee to kind of help with the development of the specific plan. So the Planning Commission has this community meeting, and then let's see, so that has to be like noticed, 15 days notice, and then the community meeting is informal. The applicants present the proposal for a specific plan, and at that point the Planning Commission can decide not to continue the process if they determine no substantial benefit is likely to result. They can determine that substantial community benefits could result. And then at that point, they would appoint a citizens advisory committee to work with the applicants to develop the specific plan. And then the planning commission may also determine in written findings the proposed specific plan provides a substantial benefit without having the potential of adverse impacts on neighboring properties, the town's infrastructure, or the environment, and direct the applicants to work with staff to complete the specific plan and schedule a public hearing. So there's three courses. Either they can drop it then and there, decide, we don't think a substantial benefit or result. They can say, well, it's possible it could result. We're going to appoint a citizens advisory committee to work with the applicant, or they could decide this is really a win-win. There's no potential of any adverse impact on neighboring properties, and we think a substantial benefit is going to result. So in that case, we're just going to direct the applicant to work with staff and not appoint a citizens advisory committee. I think that would be pretty rare, that situation. So the advisory committee, if one is formed, it will vary according to the nature of the specific plan. We'll have at least one planning commission member, one or more representatives of other town boards as they may be affected or involved. And in the case of considering protection of open space, there would be at least one representative from the Conservation Commission, one or more representatives of the affected neighborhood, representatives from adjoining municipalities and state agencies as they may be affected or involved or offer special expertise, members representing the community at large, and independent experts qualified to contribute to and evaluate the work of the applicants, who may serve as ex officio members. So the goal is to create a committee that's broadly representative of those whose interests may be affected, and those who are well qualified. So the applicants work with the advisory committee and staff to develop the specific plan within a deadline established by the Planning Commission. And then the applicants are responsible for the costs of this process. They're responsible for scheduling and conducting meetings, and they have to be public meetings. So they're responsible for warning these meetings, basically doing the minutes, and pretty much everything. Like this is really an applicant directed process. The staff doesn't really direct it. The staff offers support as needed. So basically, what a specific plan can change, the specific plan can refine and add detail to the objectives and policies of the town plan, provided that it's consistent with the overall vision. The specific plan can refine the standards adopted in the bylaw and create new zoning districts with their own standards. No specific plan can change the administrative procedures established in the bylaw or state statute. So the advisory committee and the applicants, after they complete their work, will present the proposed specific plan to the Planning Commission at a regularly scheduled meeting. And then basically, if the Planning Commission agrees and makes a finding that a substantial benefit will result and otherwise agrees with the specific plan, they would then forward they would transmit their findings and the corresponding bylaw and town plan amendments to the select board. And then so the process from here on would be equivalent to any town plan and bylaw amendment process. The select board would get it, they would have a public meeting, and then they would, if they want to move forward, they would have a scheduled public hearings. So this process can go on for several months. The last specific plan that was approved and adopted by the town was the one for the Nets parcel, where the substantial public benefit was the acquisition of the Pine Ridge parcel. And that, since then there has been a proposed specific plan that ended up not going through because the Planning Commission made did not make a finding that a substantial benefit would result. So
Was that the New England
that's,
chimney,
yeah,
Melinda?
that was New England Chimney Supply. So,
Good memory, Reed. I don't remember that project.
Yeah, that we
Which one was
didn't
that?
we didn't review that,
Oh, all right.
but the planning commission was considering it better part of a year ago.
yeah.
Melinda, I have a kind of a question for you. Is it your gut feeling that I think I saw in the paper, or maybe it was in one of our meetings, where they're proposing conserving 50 acres of the Glacier property on the north end of it? Is it your gut feeling that that would be enough for a substantial public benefit? I hate to put you on the spot.
That's a loaded question, Gary.
Yeah, it is. But I just want to know if that's the magnitude that they're looking for, or
I was
Well,
going to ask a similar question, but in a different way. And that is, so how large is this property? So first of all, nothing's been submitted yet. So everything that we talk about is just based on hearsay.
Yeah.
But how, just for grins, how large is this property, and what is presumably it would be subject to the 75% that place for conserved land for open space, and how much open space would that worth?
Okay, so the parcel I think is about 97 acres, maybe 9,700 acres. This parcel is not subject to Williston's open space rules because it's in the RZD and not the ARZD. So the 75% open space only applies to parcels in the ARZD that are greater than 10.5 acres. That being said, I think it was when we were talking about possibly having a requirement for open space in the RZD. At one meeting, I think I presented to you kind of a sample of parcels in the RZD and how much percentage of open space resulted from those subdivisions.
Just
varies.
naturally, right? Due to terrain and spacing of houses and natural features and so on.
Or just, however much was offered at the time. I mean, generally I think you can say that all of the constrained lands were in the open space, but some developments such as Southridge, for example, a lot of that open space would have been developable if you look at it. So, there are examples of developments that resulted in more than 50% or about 50% open space, some that resulted in less. There were some more desirable configurations of open space and some less desirable configurations. So I think it varies quite a bit. So that's the answer I can give you.
Linda, does the specific plan, does that bypass the growth management process?
Well, yeah, so you bring up a good point, Terry, and I think it's not necessarily a given, but in this case, the applicants wanted to are thinking about a specific plan because they would like to develop the property a little, more expediently than could be achieved under growth management. At present, the growth management system would allow a very slow build out in the RZD because there's a lot of competition from other proposed developments that are, kind of either up for growth management this year or have been through growth management. So, it would be a very slow build out. And so I think they are looking to have the development occur on a more rapid schedule than growth management would allow.
And just to be clear, the property owners have not approached the town about discussing conservation easements for the property and considering that parcel.
No, not yet.
And Melinda, the planning commission was going to either tell the Glazers go ahead or not go ahead. I may have missed it. Did they say, yeah, go ahead and submit something?
Yeah, the planning commission, they basically encouraged them to go ahead and submit an application. They said that, it was hard for them to provide much feedback because there wasn't a lot of information provided at the time, but they said, we want to know more. It's possible this could result in substantial benefit, maybe. So go ahead and submit us an application and we'll take a look at it.
So what other boards in town are involved in this? Is the architectural folks or the mobility group, or is it just the planning commission and the conservation commission at this point?
At this point, yeah, that's no one other boards have been involved. If they do submit an application, I could see possibly the recreation committee getting involved in this because,
Sorry, with the, I would hope that, I don't know how this would happen, if this is something the planning commission would ask for or what, but I'm thinking about traffic, if it does go forward, traffic impacts as well. Like, would there need to be a traffic study for Old Stage Road? That would significantly increase traffic demand of that intersection between Old Stage and Route 2 as well.
Possibly the DRB can request a traffic study if they think it's necessary, and they usually make a recommendation during pre-application whether they want to see a traffic study or not. And for as any moderate to large size development, that's been a pretty typical request. So just to be clear, if a specific plan is adopted, then that basically the next steps would be to go through pre-application and discretionary permit and growth management if that's warranted.
As this process goes along, I think we ought to be looking for creative ways to meet Mr. Glazer's financial needs without development.
Yeah, that's what prompted me to bring this topic up for the agenda, Carl, was not necessarily feeling like we don't have the right tools. I just wasn't sure because we've talked about a lot of them in isolation, but perhaps not talked about like our overall strategy of using the different tools at our disposal for our high priority parcels, which includes the Glazer parcel.
Yeah, it's good that we've got all of them out in front of us here.
And Carl, why is it because of traffic that you would rather not have any development in that area?
I don't know. I just see this as a very, even though this is a private property, it's a very valuable property in terms of view shed, in terms of the function that it's undergoing now. And, I just see, it's kind of emotional, but I just see development on this piece of property as paving paradise and building a parking lot.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just wondering, what the best scenario is, because there's limited money, right, to buy or to, contribute in some way to preserving high priority parcels. Others will be coming up, and if a specific plan in an area with sewer for housing, possibly affordable housing, along with preserving some of that view or maybe all of the view shed and some of the open space there, I don't know, it just seems like it might be a good compromise, even though we'd rather not see it at all.
Linda, is it easy to pull up the prioritization, conservation prioritization, and just see what the factors that led to this particular parcel being a high priority?
Mhm.
That might be helpful. I know, Carl, you were feeling like it's sort of an emotional thing as well, but if we can, it did show up as a high priority for conservation by using our methodology in 2020.
Actually, I'm gonna have to.
I would just like early on to know exactly what Mr. Glazer would like to get out of
So
this.
Melinda, I have just a process question. I'm just wondering about, so I'm happy to talk about strategies for conserving high priority parcels and all that. I'm just, this meeting agenda wasn't warned for a specific conversation about this property. So I'm just wondering how far into a discussion about this particular property we can go.
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing. Like, should we just, I'm sorry if I derailed by asking about the specific plan. I felt like that was the tool on the list that I didn't have clarity about that seemed relevant because of this discussion, but I didn't really mean to like send us down the rabbit hole.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I kind of think that it may not be fair to the property owners to get into a really detailed discussion about their property without having invited them to the meeting or warned it specifically on the agenda.
So when, just in general, when a piece of land comes up that is high, priority, at what point does the Conservation Commission in the town look into, finding funding from other organizations like the Land Trust or Public Trust for Public Lands, sort of like the Herskowitz property, Catamount, different properties. When is it appropriate to approach those different organizations to try to look for funding? Because really, any of these pieces of land, it's really at the end of the day, it's money. It's money what the owners of pieces of land are looking to acquire. So if the funds can be raised for any property, it doesn't matter, Glazer, Herskowitz or whatever, at what part of the process does that come relevant?
So Terry, staff usually does some research well ahead of time without kind of disclosing what piece of land it is. There are ways to kind of put some feelers out and do some general research to find out whether or not even organizations would be interested in funding such a thing. So that is, I guess, usually that happens, kind of well ahead of time. But there are limits as to what you can do without, just being, while maintaining confidentiality and so forth. As far as like, I guess I'm thinking about Catamount. I guess the point where the town really got involved was when the McCulloughs approached the town and said, we're really interested in working with you to conserve this property. And we had a meeting with the Land Trust and Trust for Public Land. And at that point, I think they had already reached out to the Trust for Public Land and the Land Trust. And once they, I think, got a feeling that this would be, a high priority for those organizations, then the town was brought into it as a partner. But, not all open space is going to be a high priority for these organizations. And you kind of have to have an understanding of that and what's going to be high on their radar and what isn't going to rise to that. For the Land Trust, they're not really looking at anything that's less than 100 acres. And even lands that are, around 100 acres or, 150 acres, they're somewhat hesitant to take those on unless they have, unless there's something really special about them. So that sort of gives you an idea. Trust for Public Land doesn't usually get involved unless it's a really high priority piece of land. For Catamount, obviously had a lot going for it. It's almost 400 acres. It had incredible recreational value and natural resource value. So it was really an exceptional parcel. But that sort of gives you an idea. I can't really speak to the process around the Herskovitz parcel because at that point I wasn't, I only came on board as, I only started at Williston when the whole process was almost done. And, we were ready to close on the property. So you probably know more about that than I, but.
Yeah, from what I remember of that project was the same idea where the landowner approached the town with their ideas and eventually the town worked it out with the landowner to use the ERF funds to conserve the land, the parcel.
Land Trust,
Yeah, where there's not a land trust involved until, I don't know, actually, I don't know who owns the title or deed or whatever for the land, for the conserved lands, if that's the town or a land trust. But Melinda, I guess you sort of just answered my question, but that I was going to ask, but would it be worth a conversation, bringing in a couple of different people, a couple of people from different land trusts and talking with them about pulling up our priority map and and talking through some of these high priority parcels with them, just to gauge their interest in conserving and whether or not they'd be interested in conserving some of these parcels or working to conserve some of these parcels in sort of a more proactive way than waiting for the landowner to decide what they want to do and then come to us.
Yeah, that could be worth doing. And if you'd like, I can reach out to, I guess, Bob Heiser and invite him to a meeting and we can have a more general discussion about high priority parcels.
Would the draw for this land would be agricultural, recreation, wetlands?
You can see in the paragraph on the screen here the different items that went into the 2020 prioritization. The methodology document that's linked there has a lot more detail, but yeah, those are the types of things that would score high for this parcel. And then also pressures were taken into account, such as being within the sewer district and proximity to town and stuff. There were different development pressures that were considered in the prioritization. Without the fact that it's on sewer, it probably would not have been in the high category if I were to guess.
Just one other question about the Planning Commission. They're very busy right now with the form-based code, I know, and I don't know how close they are to wrapping that up. So do they have time right now to really look at this project, or are they pretty consumed by the form-based code right now?
Well, if a specific plan application gets submitted, then they will need to look at it. Doesn't matter how busy they are, they're gonna
Yes, they
have to
are.
do it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Or
So they would-
they'll make a decision about, I think they already decided that they'd be interested in seeing an application. So, but yeah, they always have a decision to make about whether to consider a specific plan or not. But in this case, I think they would definitely.
Okay, so when someone puts in an application, they are starting to spend money on hiring somebody to drop a plan and things like that. So they're kind of moving in the direction of what they want, how they want to develop that piece of land.
So I just want to second what Eric said. I think that'd be a great idea to take a proactive method of looking over these priority properties in general.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree. That's a great idea. I mean, we kind of did that, right? We have some that are the highest on the list and we go down, but yeah, we could also discuss that with Bob Heiser or someone.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
think if we could get, Bob Heiser and maybe Kate from Trust for Public Land. I guess they're the two land trusts that we've worked with the most. I don't know if there'd be any others out there. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but
Mhm.
And we're armed with more information now than a year ago, thanks to the work with Jens. The information about the significant wildlife habitat areas is useful for this conversation.
yeah, and actually, I think I was just going to suggest to head that direction also, Reed, and maybe it'd be good to get Jens on that same call as well. The Fish and Wildlife. Is Jens Fish and Wildlife? I can't remember. Or Forest
He's
Parks and Rec.
Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
It,
So they
yeah.
they're also in the business of conserving land. So
Mm-hmm.
looking at the map here, we have a couple of parcels right along the Hudson River. Sorry, my work brain is turning on, and I've been working on Hudson River issues. Winooski River, that they may be interested in working with us on as well. So Jens may provide a good perspective from Fish and Wildlife Department.
Mhm.
All right. Melinda, let's get back to your list of different ways of conserving parcels. Does anyone have any other questions on any of these other conservation strategies? I guess my only question is for the transfer of development rights. I know we wanted to talk more about that, but we were holding off until form-based code was kind of in place. Is that correct, Melinda?
Yeah, and I think, I think what's probably going to happen is that there won't be density limits in the growth center. So that was the whole, that kind of would eliminate the leverage that you get with transfer development rights. Because I think, there's an idea that you don't want to make it harder to develop in the growth center. You want to encourage density. So why have limits on density in the growth center? And if you don't have limits, then there's no point in transferring development rights to the growth center because there are no limits. If that makes
Would it
sense.
be accurate, Melinda, would it be accurate to say that the only option we really would have is to use one of the other, like the residential zoning district that would still have limits and transfer development to the RZD from the ARZD or something like that?
Yeah, that would be, I'm just going to bring up this I'm gonna bring this map up because it shows you, if we're looking at the RZD, and I know it's kind of hard to see where the RZD is, but basically it's kind of this area right here, right? And there's really only a few parcels left, large parcels in the RZD. This one, obviously this one, that's being, at least contemplated for development at this point. And then this one is the Catamount. So, and yeah, that one's in the growth center. So there's not,
There's really not a lot to transfer to.
Yeah, you're really only talking about one or two parcels that are, that are large, that are left there. The rest are either protected as open space or, small parcels. So I don't know. So that may not be as effective a tool as, as intended. And while the town has had transfer development rights for a long time, it hasn't been used very often. It's been used maybe a couple of times. But
And are
yeah.
we pretty sure that the let's see, growth management, not the growth management, form-based code that's a part of it that will stay intact, is that there's no restrictions of growth?
It
So
certainly seems that way.
currently growth management does restrict. There is a cap on units in the growth center. And what's being contemplated now is removing that cap for the growth center. Still having it in the RZD and the ARZD, but just removing it for the growth center so as to encourage density in the growth center. Yeah.
And that seems to be widely accepted from all sides. That probably will go through.
I don't know what you mean by all sides, but
well, whatever, everyone that, the planning commission and developers and we're all on board with that.
Well, I'm sure, I can't really speak to that. I guess this is just, if that happens, it would be a bylaw amendment and would go through the same process of any bylaw amendment. And I don't think it's something the planning commission has really discussed in detail at this point, but it's only my my sort of just feeling from talking to Matt that may be the direction that we're headed, or is likely to be the direction we're headed.
So in the absence of transfer of development rights, the conservation easement route, which we just discussed, having some proactive conversations with land trusts, et cetera, that would fall under conservation easements.
Yeah. I mean, and there's other strategies on this list. I don't necessarily think it would apply to parcels in the RZD, but for other high priority parcels that are out in the ARZD, there's strategies that are less permanent, but maybe, effective, at least, in the short term. And that's, the current use program, sort of encouraging, working with landowners to enroll in current use. what else is there? Maybe, I don't know, possibly looking at the really high priority, especially the habitat blocks, and maybe contemplating a different zoning district for those, like establishing a conservation district or a forest district for certain areas of town.
Yeah, those two were interesting to me, Melinda, the concept of creating a district specifically to conserve a particular area at a higher rate than the other zoning districts.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
Do we have a forest district? Do we have a, no, because it says no, we've never used it before.
Yeah, I mean, I think at one point the town had a ridge line, but it was an overlay district, I think. I'm talking about like a standalone, a base zoning district that would be zoned conservation or forest. As you can imagine, that could be controversial, but.
Yeah, it's like taking the SWHA map and turning the areas that were tier 1 into a conservation block or something like that, or conservation district on the zoning, and that would be even more firm or restrictive than just referencing the SWHA when making recommendations about development in the existing zonings.
Yeah, we'd be like, our town would be like a mini Adirondack Park. This area, this area is zoned as wilderness.
I don't know that we want to go there.
So a forest district, they're talking about a managed forest district, correct? I mean, this is for logging as well as recreation. It wouldn't be for example, wildlife resources and letting the forest go.
Not necessarily.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
I mean, if you read the description, I mean, forest management could certainly happen, but I don't think it's necessary.
Includes wildlife habitat and
I mean, I see
headwaters.
Yeah, I see the conservation district and forest districts as pretty similar. Just, kind of framed a little bit differently, but yeah.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense.
The conservation district seems like it's more similar to the way we talk about conservation priorities in our town, because we don't have a lot of those headwaters or high elevation areas.
Mm-hmm.
And I did make a note here that we have conservation areas, but those are overlays and not base zoning district. So
right,
yeah.
that was going to be my question, Melinda. So these are both, the conservation and forest districts are both in the yellow zone, indicating that they're regulatory tools and strategies. And I'm not recalling a instance in which we've used the conservation district tool as a regulatory strategy. We just use it to inform, in my memory anyway, we've used it to inform our recommendations on development.
Well, that is it's regulatory in that it's in the bylaw, chapter 27. And although, although it doesn't, chapter 27 allows, it has sort of provisions to allow development in those areas. It basically discourages development from, from the significant wildlife habitat area and the view shed and et cetera. And then you all, and again, we had this conversation about how do we prioritize those different, the different values in that set of resources. Well, you go through that exercise every time you review a subdivision, you're looking at our regulations. protecting all those different resources and kind of, making recommendations about site plan and citing the houses, et cetera.
Okay, thanks. I guess I just didn't think of I didn't realize the significant wildlife habitat area, for example, I didn't realize that we use it as a regulatory tool, but I guess we do. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a conservation district, it's something we don't have today in a zoning fashion. We have it as part of the bylaws as conservation areas, sort of the equivalent. Is that what you were saying in the right-hand column, Melinda?
Yeah, so it's not like a base zoning district like the residential zoning district, the ag rural residential zoning district. These are all overlays. So they're on top of the existing zoning district, and they are regulatory in that, like at least with the watershed protection area, that's an area where development is prohibited altogether, but it's an overlay district. Same with the other conservation areas, although the regulations are not as prohibitive as the watershed protection buffers. And,
Yes.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Melinda. Yes, it seems like the way we have done it is, I think, more effective than just having a conservation district. I mean, we're looking at what's important, and yeah, again, unless we think about like maybe the area around Lake Iroquois or somewhere, we don't really have an area that maybe we would want to call a conservation district.
Mm-hmm.
And we already are considering strengthening language in chapter 27 about SWHA.
Right.
Yeah, and that's still a conversation we need to have about that language. Are there any other questions about these strategies?
Melinda, as you put these together, were there any in particular that you felt like the Conservation Commission should at least consider either implementing or changing how we have implemented it?
I guess one thing I'm wondering is this here. I mean, so the ARZD is zoned for basically 2-acre zoning, but there's also that 75% open space, which, I mean, I guess effectively it ends up being a large lot zoning. I don't know. I guess that's just a question in my mind. Is that the best? Is the 2-acre zoning the best kind of zoning tool that we have, or should that be, should we reconsider how we zone the ARZD? Just a question. I don't have a strong opinion about it. That and also as far as the non-regulatory tools, I think it might be worth taking a look at the community strategies for Vermont Forest and Wildlife book and just looking at all the strategies. There's lots and lots of different strategies in there that I didn't really get a chance this time around to kind of look through and list off. But I think there's definitely something to be said for working with private landowners on their own stewardship and in trying to protect land, not necessarily like, in using non-regulatory strategies and specifically just working with landowners in creative ways, not necessarily implementing conservation easements, but just using strategies
Having a land ethic.
yeah, like current use and like maybe there's an opportunity for landowners to like work together and form a cooperative of some sort to manage their lands. You know, I don't know. Those are just some thoughts.
Thanks, Linda.
That sounds like a part of that could be a project for one of the field naturalists.
Well, yeah, in a later group, perhaps
Yeah.
at a later time.
Yeah.
Laura, I have one item to put to the commissioners.
Go ahead.
And that is just that I'd like us to think about when we look at the strategies that we have available to us here, and thank you, Melinda, for pulling them together and describing how they've been implemented or not. I think we need to be mindful of this entire picture when we're working on funding for the ERF, and making justifications for our ask for ERF funding. I do feel like we've tried to take those things into account when asking in the past, but it feels like we are not going to be able to achieve our goals for conservation through the levels of funding we've been able to achieve recently with the ERF.
Mhm.
And we are going to need to push hard on using all available tools in order to meet our goals for conservation.
Mhm.
So Rita, it seems like the Catamount was kind of a good example of doing that. You know, we got money from all over the place from numerous sources, and it worked out.
Yeah,
I know
really.
the ERF contributed a bunch too, but
Yep.
not the majority of it.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, that's an ideal scenario. And it was
At the same time, Melinda just sort of outlined how like Catamount had a lot going for it, and maybe there are, I think to Reed's point, other parcels, hang on, please sneak out, that are not going to be, are not going to engender the same sort of outpouring of support. I'm thinking like one thing that I'm working on professionally right now is writing up a case study of how Ashley Town Forest was conserved, and that is like straddling Sharon and Stafford, and it's sort of like a similar situation there where it was like such a pressing need and such a charismatic place that there was this huge outpouring of support, and I'm almost like nervous about writing it as a case study because I don't know that it's like transferable. And so like I guess the question is like, what are like the transferable strategies, or what are the ones that we can like safely rely on as a conservation commission? Maybe not safely rely on, but I think like if when there's a parcel of value, but that's not going to have the same public, I don't know, charisma is the only word I can think of. I don't know if that's right for a forest, but
a forest can have charisma.
Sense of place. Those are good points, Kim. And I was just going to add that, particularly for the Catamount project, another thing that had going for it was Kate Warner and the Trust for Public Land and the resources that they brought to that project. And I realized that not every land conservation project that we want to do in town is going to attract the Trust for Public Land. But if we could figure out a way to get someone who could help with projects like that, who can, I'm not suggesting, and I'm not volunteering, I'm not suggesting anyone on this commission volunteer for this, but if we could get someone who could help navigate those different funding opportunities external to the town's ERF funds for some of these projects that are smaller than what the Trust for Public Land would be interested in, that would be super helpful. I don't know how we would do that, but that's, I saw that as like a key piece to the success of the Catamount conservation, with Kate driving those grant applications that the TPL applied for on behalf of the town, and having those conversations with donors and fundraisers and working through that whole end of the spectrum, that I don't think Melinda is allowed to do. I'm not sure about that, but, and we don't have, the commission don't have the capacity to do that either. Health gas, if someone wants to volunteer, great. I'm not gonna suggest that let's do it. But that's just, that was just another piece, and I think that would be super helpful if we could figure out a way to recruit somebody to help do that work for us as well.
And maybe that's a good question if we do pull together some representatives from various stakeholders for land conservation. It'd be a good question if have any recommendation on how to navigate that, given that we're a volunteer board and Melinda's wearing multiple hats. What is the best way to navigate that and optimize our partnerships?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
I
I
mean-
think,
Go ahead, Melinda.
well, yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of a question of, there's some pieces of land that will have great importance to a community and not really rise to the top regionally or statewide, so not attract the attention of those bigger funders. And so just, I don't know, there needs to be a mechanism at the local level. And I know, I believe in the, well, for one example, I mean, it's not a great example, but even for the Herskovitz parcel, I mean, it did rise to capture the attention of the Vermont Housing Conservation Board and Vermont Land Trust, simply because it was an opportunity to expand an already conserved park. So that was one reason it did, but it also had a lot of local importance. And so the local community, and Terry, you can speak to this, the neighbors in the local community were involved in raising funds for the project. And that was a big contributing factor to the success of that project, was just the local fundraising that occurred. And that may be what has to happen for these large parcels that have so much local importance, but don't really attract the attention of the regional conservation groups.
The Fellowship of the Wheel was huge too there.
Yeah.
They were a big force in organizing.
Yeah.
And this particular, just using the Glacier property as an example, is, I'm thinking agriculture, local neighbors, the windswept farm, those, and the trail possibility. I know the planning board spoke about that at past meetings, about the connection and trails through that piece of land, but for the public good.
Yeah, Melinda, can you remind me how much was raised by private donations for Catamount? I mean, was it a lot?
Yeah, it was a lot. It was, I believe it was over 100,000.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Accessing, sometimes all you need to do is ask and people will be very generous. And I'm wondering if that is something that the new energy coordinator might be able to do. I mean, conserving lands might be part of a strategy. I don't know, that just might be a way to think about someone who might know how to access funding for things like this.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea, Laura. I guess my one question is to find out from the town whether or not town staff are allowed to do development work like that. Sorry, fundraising work. I'm thinking development in terms of like organizational fundraising, not land development in this case, but
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, just an idea that popped in my head. All right. Do we want to talk at a future meeting about the community strategies that are outlined in the Vermont Department of Fish and Wildlife book, or do we want to just look at that and personally just go through that and keep those in mind?
I'd like to see two things happen as a result of our conversation today, one of which is what you mentioned, looking at the community strategies together. I would like to do that. And the second is I like the idea of setting aside time to sit down with some regional or statewide stakeholders to talk about what strategies they think we would apply to our situation or how best to coordinate with them.
Mhm.
Both of those seem like good next steps now that we've taken a look at current and potential strategies.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And Melinda, do landowners know? I mean, they must, I mean, somebody who has agricultural fields or forests must know about the current use program. I mean, people know about these things, correct? Or are there people out there that just have no idea?
I think that I'm not sure. There may be people out there that don't know much about it, but I would be surprised if, if you're a large landowner, you're paying a lot of taxes, and you'd probably know. But yeah, I guess I mean, I do, like some landowners didn't enroll. Like I know a landowner in the ARCD that had a lot of land and didn't really enroll until recently, or, so.
Is there an option? I think it's in Montpelier right now about creating a part of the current use program where you don't have to actually have a forestry management plan in the sense that you have to harvest, and where it can be used more of a carbon sequestration and things like that, because some people don't want to log and disturb their land. So I think is that an option?
That is a bill that's currently going through the state legislature right now. It's like it's being voted on. I don't know exactly what stage it's at, but it is being considered and voted
But it
on.
would be an amendment to the current use. It's not
Yeah.
a new program.
Right,
I
right.
think that's something people don't know about. That might be something to do outreach on it if it does pass, that you can
Yeah.
actually be in current use without, having logging and skidders and things like that on your land. So
Mhm.
It's not approved yet, though. I mean, I think that's, as
No.
Linda said, it's being considered now.
Yeah, I don't think it's a thing for us to do outreach on at this point, because it's
Yeah.
unclear, like, if it will pass and what it will look like, and really like what the mechanisms and details will be. So I think it's just like, it's good for us to know that it's out there and it may be something in the future.
Yeah, and if it does become an amendment to current use, we can certainly utilize Ethan Tapper to do that outreach, or help us do that outreach.
I'm sure that he will make lots of outreach material on his YouTube and his weekly or monthly columns. He will be on top of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you. So I think we can, I can't remember how much time we had allocated for this, but
I feel like we've dug into it deeply. Thanks
Yeah.
for everybody for the discussion.
yeah, and thanks for your suggestions, Reed, about next steps.
Mhm.
Okay, so Melinda, for the policies for conservation lands, country parks and trails, and looking at the town of Underhill Trail policy, I can't remember if this was something we had, I mean, we had talked about looking at policies of our own, correct, for our own conservation lands, and we're just talking about whether we should do that and how we should do that.
Yeah, so this has come about because we've run into situations where there have been some conflicts with abutting landowners, some questions about policy such as hours of operation, and there have also been sort of questions that have come to mind about spring closures of trails, closure during mud season, so there's just some, I think it would be good to have sort of a overriding general policy about the town's trails and country parks, and a policy that describes, basically how we'll handle conflict with abutting landowners. Do we have an hour of, hours of operation? What are they? Do we want to consider spring closure of trails to protect from, protect it from erosion? Things like that. Also extends to how the town pursues and acquires trail easements. And I think, Laura, the recent example of, that you and I discussed about trying to, pick out trails for students to go and do site walks on was problematic, because some of the landowners whom the town had gotten easements from were really reluctant to have a trail developed on their property, and just were almost resentful about it. And so I think it bears sort of looking at the policy for getting trail easements, and what, just thinking more about that, and maybe being more strategic about it, just to, I guess one, avoid a situation where the town acquires a trail easement like as a condition of a development, and then discovers that you can't build a trail there because of Act 250 conditions, or you can't build a trail there because it's too wet, or you can't build, or the landowner is really against having a trail there and felt like they were coerced into granting an easement. So just thinking about all those things, and developing a set of policies that can guide, can guide us going forward. Those are my thoughts about this, and that's my that's my introduction. And I guess I can also, like I brought up this town of Underhill, because I think they have a lot of good stuff in here as far as how they deal with landowners, how they have a trail steward program, which we now have as well, how they design trails. This probably is a little bit outdated in terms of trail design, but there's a lot of good ideas in here, and it could be worth adopting some of these ideas anyway. But I don't know, that's why I provided a link to it.
I am gonna sign off because I have to bring Nico to Audubon, and he's like getting unready for Audubon. He was already ready and he's getting unready. But I wanted to say, I read through this and I thought it was really comprehensive, and I like the idea of us doing something similar, and my only we just have to make sure we update that is that the citations that I think this was, done 10 years ago. And so I just want to make sure that especially in the what makes a good trail, I think as mountain biking has blown up, there has been a lot more empirical work about how mountain biking trails hold up and what makes a good mountain biking trail. So if we do something like this, I would just want to see more updated sources.
Mhm.
But otherwise, I was impressed with how comprehensive this was.
Yeah, I'll second that. This is a very impressive handbook. A lot of work too. So it's not an easy lift if we want to do something like this, but I think it would be a good lift to make. Get there.
Yeah, and maybe it's something that, maybe we could think about hiring somebody to put something similar together.
Yeah, I even think it's a student project. It's really
Mhm,
comprehensive.
mhm.
So do you think this would be too much for a student project, a UVM group, or would this be something? for a
That's my
possibility?
feeling, but I'm wondering if Gary, can you imagine a group of undergrads producing? I mean, the right group of undergrads, maybe.
Graduate
I think,
students, maybe.
yeah, and also it depends. Is it cool, Melinda, to just take stuff out of this? Is that a common practice among you guys?
I would
I wasn't going to ask that in a
permission.
recorded meeting.
Well, I mean,
would-
I think it is good, and I think we could certainly
Yeah.
modify it to fit our needs, or modify something like that to fit our needs. I mean, we'd want to ask them, I guess, or I don't know what the
Yeah,
procedure is, but
Yeah, you definitely
Um,
want to ask, and then definitely want to cite them, if we
yes,
took a large amount of material from this, then we should probably even just say, this is modified.
adopted
the
from or
Underhill
something. Yeah,
Trail handbook or whatever. So,
yeah. I mean, in a way, it'd be. I would think that they'd be in favor of people using it because it just advances the whole. Everybody having a good job done. And in that case, if we could use this as a template and take parts of it, then I think students could grad students for sure could put something together for us and modify it to fit our needs.
Yeah, I was thinking that too, Gary, that is it the Field Naturalist program? I can't remember now, where the professional, was it professional master's degree, where they have to do a project.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one that Wal Pullman's running now,
Yeah.
the Field Naturalist program. And maybe I don't know what timing we want to fit this in, but certainly next year's group, somebody could take on something like this.
And it's possible that Underhill adopted this from somebody else's trail handbook as well.
Yeah, that's a
Who
good
knows,
point.
maybe there's a state handbook guidance or something that informed
Yes.
Underhill's plan handbook.
Yes.
But as far as, I guess maybe things to be thinking about, I could come up with a series of questions for you all. Maybe we could even do a survey or something related to policies and what you'd want to see.
Should there be a separate one for mountain biking and separate for hiking, or is that all together? Would that be?
I think it should be all lumped together, and there's not, we allow mountain biking in 2 different parks now. So, I don't know. I'm sure that there are nuances to the discussion, whether it's mountain biking or walking or whatever, but I think those could all be included. In the
The
same
Underhill one
document.
does include descriptions of how trails are different for mountain biking, hiking, and horseback riding.
Right. Yeah.
I like hearing the birds behind Carl. I just had to say that.
Are you in
too.
Georgia, Carl?
I've had two cardinals counter singing on either side of me all morning.
Yeah, I'm jealous,
Mhm.
Carl. That sounds like fun.
Can I ask a question, Melinda? When we have someone who wants to develop a parcel, you know, a private landowner wants to build a house or, you know, a sugar bush or whatever, do we typically say, can we have an easement for a trail? Or do we say, you know, there's a problem here because there's some wetlands, but if you give us a trail easement, we can, not worry about it? Or how do we generally do that so that a landowner doesn't feel coerced into getting an easement?
Well, I think it's in the past, I don't know, my understanding is that it's been problematic sometimes. And usually the town asks for a trail if there is a desired connection during a development approval or during a site plan review. And I think that during the review, the person that wants to develop is often very accommodating and, says, oh yeah, sure, you can have a trail easement because they want something from the town. They want a permit. So it makes sense that they would be accommodating. But then, then later on, like, I don't know, I can think of a couple of developments where after the person had obtained a permit, they or their neighbors came back and, there were petitions against any trail development, and just, it often comes back later. So I think that maybe the discussions need to be a little bit more nuanced, or maybe, I don't know. I think it's problematic to get a trail easement and then when you try to actually build something there, have it turn out that there are, resentments or bad feelings about it or anything like that.
It seems as though a handbook or something like what Underhill has would help us in managing those grievances and setting expectations better, but it wouldn't eliminate them. The whole process of getting the easements and the understanding about what the trade-off is, that piece is not fixed by this.
I think one of the problems, at least in my opinion, is we often don't implement the easement right away and sometimes do it many years later. And so people that have built near it or something in the interim aren't really fully aware of it. And so it becomes kind of a surprise, because I think a lot of times we're planning way ahead. We do want a primitive path through this area. We got to do it a piece at a time. And so we don't actually implement it many times till a lot later, if at all.
Yeah, until we have the full connection.
Yeah.
And I realized too that I didn't really answer Laura's question about natural constraints and kind of getting an easement without thoroughly considering the constraints, which is problematic too, because sometimes a developer proposes a trail easement and then, we're like, oh, great, and then we don't really think about the feasibility on the ground of constructing that trail until after the fact. And just one sort of related aside or one related note is that on the state of Vermont parcel that we're going to investigate for a trail easement, they've actually reneged on their permission to even investigate because, as it turns out, they may have to set aside all or part of the land for agricultural soil mitigation under Act 250. So there may not even be the possibility of having a trail across there for that reason. So there's a lot of different factors that go into the feasibility part of this. And oftentimes it's hard to, to investigate all those things prior to or during development review. Yeah.
Was that the land that the circ was going to go on?
No, it's the public safety building that you guys reviewed a while ago, the state public safety building,
The-
police
the
barracks.
Police barracks. So they're reneging on having a
Well,
trail.
they said they wanted to hold off on any site visits or reconnaissance until after they resolve the issue of agricultural soil mitigation. And so that has the very real possibility of preventing any kind of trail across there.
I have a kind of a thinking at one level higher. We've talked about the challenges of managing the miles of trail we already have, Melinda. So I was just wondering what folks thought about how likely we are to really pursue a lot more trails, or whether we really are sort of at a tipping point where there's so much maintenance required on the existing trails that it's limited ability to establish new trails.
Is there any money coming along from the, COVID? I'm just going to call it COVID money. The town did get some money for that. Is there any money set aside for, repairing the trails? And because they did get significant use during that, last 2 years.
There is some money, but it's not going to be additional to what we already have. In other words, there's currently money in the capital budget it's a trail management fund that's going to be funded this next year at $10,000 and then in successive years at $20,000 annually. However, so what they decided to do is they decided to take the money for this coming year out of the ARPA funds. So it's not going to increase the budget or anything. It's just that the source of funds is coming at least partially from ARPA.
It's reducing the tax rate.
Yeah, right. Yep.
Melinda, is there a policy for if a landowner says, you know what, a trail is a good idea, but the trail easement, it turns out where we build our house, it goes right in front of our house. I don't think we want the trail in front of our house. Can we put it, farther back on our property, like, so that, we don't see people walking by? Is there a way to change the locations of easements?
I think a lot of the time we have a fair bit of flexibility. Go ahead, Melinda.
Yeah, that's just what I was going to say. Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, that's good to know too, because I wonder if, especially if there's an easement through a wetland, I wonder if, if
The landowner doesn't have to adjust though. If the mapped easement happens to be not good terrain, they are not required to allow us to move that easement. Is that
okay.
right, Melinda?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the wetland is usually the area that's furthest away from the houses and the area that's not going to disturb people, the area that can't be built upon. So that's where they put the trail easement.
Another thing we've done in the past is allowed once the trail is implemented, if there are things going on associated with the trail which the landowner doesn't like, is they have the ability to come to us and say, hey, there's some issues here that we need to correct. And I think we've been pretty good at, like with McKay's, when it first went in up here on Sunset Hill Road, we allowed biking in the beginning, but then it became a big problem. So we had to shut down the biking component of it.
Yeah, and that was you all are aware of the issues on Isham Farm, and that where the town had acquired a trail easement over private land, and ended up eventually the trail use conflicted with, specifically dogs, conflicted with their agricultural operations and their land stewardship activities.
This is another pie in the sky idea. Before those today, but I guess for the trail funding, the trails perspective, another option would be to take like a fellowship of the wheel approach that's there for mountain biking trails, and set up something like that for hiking trails, either here in town or regionally. That could be an advocacy group for maintaining the trail networks and fundraising as well to help support the town for the maintenance costs. Again, nothing that we or the town can do, but
In like a trails committee.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's my dream. The town could have a trails committee.
Is Ann O'Day coming back this year, or someone in her capacity?
I think, yeah, she's definitely expressed interest. So hopefully she'll be back this year. But I mean, we'll definitely have somebody.
Big boots to fill, literally.
Mm.
So is just in general, talking about trails, so the Conservation Commission has $10,000 this year to spend on trails?
FY23, so starting July 1st.
Okay, so the
And-
money has been used for this past fiscal year, this year fiscal year.
Yeah. Mhm.
So nothing till July.
Yep.
All right, well, thank you so much, Melinda, for putting that on the agenda.
Yeah.
It's important. Is there anything else about policies for trails and lands?
Do we have any specific action items that we want to document? Asking
you all wanna-
Underhill if we can, if we have permission to leverage their handbook, so long as we cite them.
Yeah, and I would ask you all, if you haven't already, to take a look at that document and, maybe note any questions or comments or things that you think would be particularly valuable to use or not valuable to use. That would be helpful. And I can reach out to somebody at the town to ask them about, kind of using their work.
Okay, that sounds great.
So Commissioner's job is to send notes to Melinda about what sections we like, dislike, or have questions about.
Maybe not send me notes, but just jot down notes and we can have a future discussion about it, and maybe also think about specifically for Williston, what policies do we need to discuss?
Mm-hmm.
How was the work on the Allenbrook Trail going? Wasn't there some work being done over there?
Yeah, they're replacing the boardwalk. They're working away on it. They've got it mostly framed up, and
The Black Locust looks beautiful.
Oh, they've got it now? I didn't see
Yeah,
it.
it looked like it got delivered. Yeah,
Ah,
I
okay,
saw it. I saw it all
Yeah.
piled up, unless it was
cool.
something else I saw. But yeah, they had fresh lumber piled up.
Ah. I'll have to take a look. I mean, when did I walk there? Maybe it was the day before yesterday. Yeah, I'll definitely have to check it out. But they're going to be doing the bridge portion last because they have to drive some helical piles. And, but I suspect that it's going to get done in the next few weeks, which will be great.
What was the Black Locust local?
No, I don't think
No.
so.
Okay.
Yeah, there's only like, there's very limited sources for Black Locust. And I think one happens to be in southern Vermont or northern Massachusetts or something like that. So I think that's where they're getting it from.
There's actually some significant Black Locust stands along North Williston Road, but
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
they're not. We don't have access to them,
Mm.
and the cost to mill them locally probably couldn't compete with
Yeah.
other sources.
That's fairly
Yeah.
local. Yeah, at least it's in the New England.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, great. So if everybody could do that for when we put that on a future agenda. I know for our next agenda, we're going to be looking at the Catamount application. Is that right, Melinda? For our next meeting?
Oh, yeah. So
Catamount development.
yeah, it's now called Summerfield, which is
Is that the
good
golf
because
course?
then, yeah, because then we won't confuse it with the other catamounts in town.
So that's the golf course, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Right. So we'll take a look at that probably next time. And maybe, I'll keep you posted as to whether we get an application for a specific plan.
Melinda, there's two specific plans in front of the planning commission right now?
Nope.
Oh,
Just Glazer is the one they're waiting on.
Yeah.
and the church one was withdrawn?
He never submitted anything, and it was only just a sort of an idea that Chris Snyder was considering, but it didn't really go very far. It didn't really go
Okay.
anywhere. So
So he just,
as
was
far
that
as I
the-
know, he's
suggesting?
yeah.
All right. So Melinda, let's go on to updates for the UVM Field Naturalist program.
I guess, let's see, I don't really have a lot there. They're having their last class, I believe it's on Monday, April 4th, starting at like about 12:30. And they're having some representatives from, I think, the Vermont UVM Extension Service, specifically to talk about agritourism and the potential for rural landowners to, use agritourism to sort of have a more sustainable working lands model. And so so if any of you want to come to that, I think you're invited. Again, that's Monday, April 4th, 12:30 to 4. I can send a reminder out. Also, I got involved with another UVM class, this one focused on watershed planning. Me and Chapin, I'm going to be leaning on Chapin heavily, will lead a class that will, basically focus on riparian restoration And we're going to show them a few sites near Talcott Road that Chapin has been involved with Sustainable Williston. And that's going to be when March 31st in the afternoon. That's Thursday. I think starting at 1 or 1:30. Anyway, for anybody who's interested to come along on that. And then, the Planning Commission transmitted the form-based code to the select board, or voted to transmit the form-based code to the select board. So that will be happening. The select board will begin by having just an informal community meeting. And they may vote to send the form-based code back to the Planning Commission to work on it some more, or they may vote to warn a public hearing. It's anyone's guess. But it's been an interesting process.
So I heard you say that the Planning Commission transmitted it to the select board. Do we have a rough idea for when the select board will have that conversation?
I believe it's likely going to be the April 19th meeting, but I can't guarantee that, but that's probably when it's going to be. I'll keep you posted on the exact date for that.
Okay, that's great.
Mhm.
Does
And
anyone,
yeah.
oh, go ahead, Melinda.
No, I just was going to say that's it. That's all I have for now.
Okay, great. And let's see. Does anyone have anything else? I know Kim's gone, but I wanted to thank her. She posted on Front Porch Forum when someone was ranting about Catamount and the taxes that people had paid for that, and the rich proprietor that's still there. And I don't know if anyone else saw that.
Yeah, that was an excellent piece that Kim had last night.
Yeah.
That was a good one.
Mhm.
That was good. And I know Reed was asking about, having something put out or on the website. And I know, Melinda, you're working on that one sheet kind of information.
Yeah.
Blurb. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, the Catamount Committee talked about just having like a one-page information sheet with just some very simple infographics, just explaining the benefits and the funding and the benefits of Catamount, and just trying to dispel some of the misinformation.
Mhm.
We need a dog park. That's what the other,
Right.
that might kind of alleviate some of the Catamount stuff. So.
All right.
Still waiting for a neighborhood to say they'd like to have the dogs barking next to their houses. That's what we're waiting for. You
Yeah.
really, that's the challenge, is you need space that is suitable for dog excrement to be not washing into wetlands and waterways, which usually means it needs to also be near developable land. And nobody wants to live next to a dog park. So
Mhm.
Yeah.
that's where we are.
Stuff.
Mhm.
Maybe Home Depot. Put it on the
Right.
backside of Home Depot.
Hard to walk there.
Yeah.
Right, cordon off some of the parking lot.
That's gonna.
Yeah.
Rewild some of the parking lot.
All right, well, does anyone have anything else before we adjourn? Hearing nothing, I officially adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks
Bye,
all. Thanks
everyone.
all for
Thanks,
joining us
everyone.
from far away.
Thanks.
Well.
Bye-bye.